Yeah. Nothing quite like the wife driving into the driveway. She stops, unloads the kids, and coolant starts leaking on the ground. What's going on, guys? There was in a block back again. We're in the garage with the 2006 GMC Denali XL, and it's time to swap a radiator. Oh no, so I was walking outside to check on something and noticed a wet spot under the vehicle that wasn't in a normal location, like your condensate drain for your air conditioning. And come to find out, the Yukon is leaking coolant. You can see the little puddle down there since I pulled it in the garage. It's definitely orange, the old DEX-COOL. My suspicion is there's either a radiator hose that's leaking or the radiator itself is leaking. And I did check the upper hose, which is on this side, and it's bone dry. So you can see there's some dried coolant on the radiator fins. And there's coolant kind of running down through there. But the hose itself is dry. It's not a good sign. Tells me the radiator's probably leaking somewhere around the front because it's still wet at the front and the back is dry. So we're gonna have to do some investigation and find out where it's actually leaking at. Thought it was this hose, but it's obviously not the hose. I went ahead and pulled these plastic snaps out of here. These are a two-piece plastic snap. You pull the intersection up and then you pull the whole snap out. Go ahead and pull this out of the way. All right, now with that part out of the way, I'm gonna take a look here and see what we have going on. And yeah, it looks like the radiator is actually split. Yep, it's cracked. The plastic tank is definitely cracked. You can see right there where the crack is. Starting to go down that way, down the whole tank. Just age, I guess. Be my guess. Probably the original radiator, more than likely. It doesn't look like anybody has been in here before. Just kind of taking a look around at the fasteners. They've definitely not. Yep. So I don't think anybody's been here before. So that's almost 200,000 miles on that radiator. That's not too bad. Not too bad. Everything else looks good. Let's go ahead and get started on pulling this radiator, and I'll just kind of do a time lapse and walk you through the tools that you need for the job. Now, I did do this on the sand machine, which is the other family vehicle, or the Suburban, which is also down right now due to some noise. I still have not been able to figure out where it's coming from. Something under the vehicle, has to do with the drivetrain, and I've still not been able to figure out what it is or why it's broken. So this one had to be fixed immediately because my backup is not backing up. Off the top of my head, 10 millimeter socket or wrench, a 15 millimeter socket or wrench, and a 12 millimeter socket or wrench. So the 10 millimeters is basically for taking off these small bolts along the front here. On both sides, you'll break all these loose because this center section from here to the other side actually lifts up off of here and allows you to get the radiator out. So you don't have to pull off your grill or headlights or anything like that. You can actually remove just this piece right here and all the brackets that are attached to it on the front and the back, like the electric cooling fans if you have electric fans, or if you've got a mechanical fan or clutch fan with a shroud. The same process, you remove the bolts on the back side of the shroud and you can get the shroud out of the way. And there's a couple bolts that hold the upper mount in right here. Pull those off, you can take this out of the way, and then the radiator will come up out of there. You may want to remove your air intake. That's up to you. Can make it easier. There's only a couple screws to remove, so my recommendation is take it out of the way and take a rag and stick in the hole where your air intake is, just so you don't get any trash up in there. Also, if you don't have any of these, I highly recommend, if you work on your vehicle at all, or if you do anything in the garden or anything outside, or anything where you have to mix things together or collect a large amount of fluid, these are mortar mixing pans that I picked up at a local hardware store. There's a small size and a large size. I'll be using the large size for this particular video. You can see there's oil residue in that one. I use that for an oil change on a couple vehicles. They're easy to wipe out. You can clean them out real easy, and then they nest or store within each other. So it does take up quite a bit of space, I guess, but because these are like a pretty flexible plastic, you can see they're pretty flexible. These usually just get stored outside. I mean, they've been outside for a couple years and they don't break down and crack or anything. So very handy tool. I highly recommend if you don't have these that you get you some, because like today, when it comes to catching all the coolant out of this vehicle, it's going to run down out the drain plug on one side, but there's a cross member or lower portion of the frame which it'll get caught on, then it'll kind of run back and forth, and you'll have drips in multiple locations, and a small drip pan won't do the job successfully or efficiently. So that's why I'm going to be using this. So if you're wondering where that came from, local hardware store, you can pick them up for, they used to be like $10 or less. I don't know what they are now, but anyway, I'm gonna get to work. All right, before you get started pulling all that stuff, go ahead and disconnect your lower radiator hose, which is right there from the radiator, so you can be draining your coolant. I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you, not all the radiators have drain plugs for whatever reason. The one on my Suburban did, but this one does not. So I had to pull the lower radiator hose, and yeah, it's kind of messy. I got a little bit of a coolant shower. I'll show you a picture of the radiator, and actually I'll show you the radiator here, where the drain plug should be at, and where you should be able to remove your hose if you don't have a drain plug. So I'm gonna just apologize in advance, because if there's no drain plug, you will get wet. All right, I decided to pause here to show you guys just a little bit of additional information. Got the upper radiator hose off. I was just pulling that out of the way so I could show you guys. If you have electric cooling fans, there are two connectors. There's one there and there's one over there. You want to go ahead and unplug those cooling fan connectors and then remove that little gray plug in the center down there. And what I use for all my connector removal, if you guys are curious, is one of these. Just a trim removal tool. That works on all your trim clips. It also works on the clip that like holds the hose to the radiator shroud, and the clips that are basically anywhere on the engine. You can just pop those loose with that little tool right there. I'll put a link in the description below where you can pick one of those up. You just squeeze on that little connector right there, like so, and wiggle it, and it'll come off the fan, just like that. Just squeeze back there on the back of that thing. Same thing on this side over here. Squeeze. Let's give it a little wiggle. It should come off of there. And then that center connection out the bottom, which is attached to the fans, which you'll need to remove those. Just remove that clip. And you can take a little pick tool and open that up if you want to remove the harness. I'm just going to take the whole thing off. Like so. That will allow you to remove the entire assembly up out of here without anything being attached to it. All right, now that that's off of there, and I've got the upper two 13mm bolts out of the top of the fan shroud slash cooling fan assembly, we can go ahead and pull that up out of the way. So you don't have to pull it off. You can actually lean it back far enough to slide the radiator out. So I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the oil cooling lines, the transmission cooling lines, and then we'll get this radiator up out of here. See if I can show you guys how to remove one of those lines. They're not terribly difficult to remove, but they can be a little bit tricky. So I'm gonna get a good angle in here for you. This little rubber grommet on the front of here you're gonna want to remove right there. Once you remove that rubber grommet, it will expose. Just a little snap ring down there. You don't want to lose those snap rings because then you have to go buy more. Your new radiator should have them in there. So you can use a small screwdriver or a pick tool, and you want to go in there and pull that little snap ring loose. All right. There's the clip. Looks kind of like a door clip. You guys, old school guys that have the crank windows. Kind of looks like one of those clips. May actually be the same clip, but that's what holds your cooling for your transmission and for your oil cooler, if equipped, in. Yeah, so remove that and then give your line a tug and it should come out of there. Of course, this one's not because I'm making a video. I probably shouldn't even be making because every time I make a video, it's always overly complicated. The Suburban I had the radiator out in like 5 minutes. Yeah, this thing's fighting to the death. All right, so I did pull the fan shroud assembly out so you guys can see better down in here. It gives you a little more room to work in the area. So that's the lower oil cooler line on the driver's side and your lower and upper transmission cooler lines on the passenger side. Process is the same. Pull off the rubber boot, pull out the little C-clip, and then you can remove the line. Should pop right out of there. And the reason mine didn't pop out before was there's a clip that holds those two oil cooler lines to the radiator shroud, only on the electric cooling fan models. You see my lightsabers going on in the background. I use those for painting and everything else because it's great to have extra light. Anyway, we've got our transmission lines pulled and our oil cooler lines pulled. Upper and lower radiator hose is out of the way. So let's go ahead and pull our radiator out. We'll lean it towards the vehicle. You may have some additional coolant drain out. It's completely normal. And then you'll just lift it straight up out of the radiator tray or mount or whatever you want to call it. Should come straight up out of there, just like so, with no fussing or fighting. I'm gonna go ahead and show you that there is no drain on this radiator. There should be a drain right here where my finger is, and this you turn and then it actually drains out the side, but the petcock is missing. For whatever reason, this one does not have a drain on it. My replacement does. We'll do a comparison here very shortly. This is the old radiator, and the reason we pulled it is because the tank's cracked. That was really it. Let me get this thing out of here. All right, so one thing I will mention, when you go to pull your radiator, if for whatever reason you have one of your radiator, trying to think what this thing's called. Mine's failing me right now. One of the radiator supports, it's a rubber bushing that goes into the radiator support or core support at the bottom. It's plastic, it's rubber coated. The DEX-COOL has been eating the rubber away on this, so probably about time to replace these. Kind of plastic and rubber, so the plastic won't go away, but some of the rubber could get eaten away, which is kind of funny if you think about your rubber hoses in your coolant system. That's why they call it DEX-COOL. But anyway, that's a bushing. It goes back down into the core support where your radiator goes. Show you guys real quick so that way you have an idea. The one on the passenger side's there. The one on the driver's side is not. So we're just going to take that and put that back down. Oh! Put that in the nice clean oil bath from the Yep. Nice oil bath down there where I was catching the oil from the oil cooler lines. But anyway, I'll take that and put it down in that second hole right there. And they're slotted, so it'll slide around. So when you go put your radiator in, it should be easy enough to get in there. Now, my recommendation is you go ahead and clean up all this mess that your radiator and your oil lines have made. A little bit of super clean goes a long way right now, because once your radiator's back in, it's a lot harder to clean this up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything cleaned up, and then we'll get ready to put the radiator back in. So taking a look at the new radiator, got it sitting here outside the box. Always inspect it before you install it to make sure that everything's how you need it to be. Trans-cooling lines will be on the passenger side, and there's a bung there for that return hose to the lower portion of your intake, and then this goes to the return of the coolant reservoir. Yellow one is the lower radiator hose. Got your mounts to hold the radiator in the vehicle, which you could put those plastic clips on there, and then that way when you set it down in there, you don't have to try to line these up in those rubber bungs, which would probably be the easiest way to do that. This is the drain petcock I was referring to. It's missing on the other radiator I just pulled out. This was sealed off, so there was no petcock, but typically you got a petcock here, which you can turn counterclockwise, and then your coolant will drain out that way. This is the upper and lower, respectively, mounts for the oil cooler, and this is where your upper radiator hose goes. So that's what your radiator looks like out of the vehicle. And if you do have a drain, then you can use this to drain the coolant out of the driver's side of the vehicle. If you don't have a drain, before you remove your radiator, you're going to want to put your reservoir under the passenger side where your lower radiator hose is at. Disconnect the radiator hose on the bottom and let it drain out through there. All right, before I get too far ahead of myself, on your, I'll show you over here, on your lines for your oil cooler and your transmission, you're just going to push those in there. This new radiator did have the clips and bungs that were the proper size, so all I did was just push those in. They just click into place. It's pretty straightforward. It's about the only thing else that you'll really need, I guess, to know. I hooked everything up. I'm going to put the air cleaner in place, and I'm going to test fire the engine just to make sure that I don't have any leaks in the transmission lines or the oil cooler lines over here. So if you're wondering why I got the hose hooked up here and there's no fans and all that stuff, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick test just to make sure I don't have any leaks. And then after I've tested that, we'll put the fan shroud back in, and then we'll button everything up. All right, we got it all back together. Not terribly bad. Did not have to take the radiator bracket out, which is that big piece of steel that goes across there. You can lean the radiator out and get it out. If you have a mechanical fan, which a lot of these models do, you can remove this bracket, which is both from the front and from the back, and then you don't have to take the fan off. It can be a little tricky getting it out with the fan on the engine. So I have done that before. I don't think I have a video of that. If I do, I'll post a short video with that and put a link at the top of the screen to get you there. Now, the next thing you're going to want to do is let your engine run and leave your coolant reservoir open. It will work the air out of the system back into the coolant reservoir. Your coolant level will drop below that line, that hard piece of plastic, that seam in the tank. When the coolant level drops below there, you'll just fill it back up whenever it's cold, and you'll be good to go. When you first put the radiator in, I put in so far 2 gallons of coolant. The system holds 3 gallons, a little over 3 gallons if you do not have rear heating. So if you have a Suburban or Yukon XL or an ESCALADE ESV, you'll have rear heating and you will be at 16 quarts, so about 4 gallons. So I think it's 15.9, so 16 quarts. You probably won't need all of it, but it's a good idea to at least have 2 to 3 gallons of coolant. Like I said, I just put 2 in this one, and it's probably going to be down again. It probably will not be completely full because there's still going to be some air that's got to work itself out. So outside of that little thing there, which is just a time thing, and you can really fill it up if it's level after the vehicle's been running for a while. Put the cap on, drive the vehicle. You should not notice any overheating issue because the coolant will have filled up the majority of the radiator, so you have plenty of coolant in the engine. The first thing you will notice if you have an ESV or a Yukon XL or a Suburban is that your rear heating will not work. If the coolant's low enough, your front heating won't work, and the reason why is that the heater core is located at the top of the engine, and it's actually below this upper radiator hose, but it's not up high enough to, if your coolant level gets low at all, your heat quits working pretty much first thing. So not really sure why that is, but it's a good indication to check your coolant level. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comment section below. My name's Erwin. This is The Rules in a Block. We're giving back what time is taken away. We'll see you soon.